Peter Davies' life took a significant direction change in 2002, when rehab halted his descent into addiction on 3 levels: alcohol, gambling and cocaine. He explains his journey into recovery.
My progression was alcohol, and I used alcohol from the age of, I think, addictively, from the age of 16 through until the age of 44 when I went into rehab.
And was there any particular reason for that to begin with?
I think it was a diversion. I think it was, in actual fact, because of this situation I had about not being able to get on with my peer group and not in actual fact doing the kind of things that they were doing. I had a family business to go into, so my life was sort of planned out to do that. So rather than having to go the normal route to go to university, to make friends, to chill out, to do all that sort of stuff that students should do, at the age of 20 I was ensconced into the family business. So I think really, in a way, the family role meant that I didn't need friends, and so the alcohol played a bigger part. And then, of course, in the entertainment side of things, within the business, in the early 80s, alcohol was very much part of winning orders and doing things. So it was always there. It was always part of, and it became a crutch, and it became something that was always there and always available. I actually sort of drank alcohol to excess, as I emptied all the champagne glasses at a wedding and got carried out. But that was at the age of 13, 14. But by the age of sort of 16, in terms of using alcohol, it had become to the extent that I was using probably once a week and drinking excessively, far more than my peer group would drink. So that was around the alcohol. If we're looking at gambling, the gambling began to start at that time as well. I reckon 16 or 17 I was already using gambling. Rather than sticking with my own peers and going out and doing what normal 17-year-olds were doing, I would start going to the dog track, and I would start going into betting shops and looking at the horse races. I remember when I was 11 or 12, actually, I've just remembered it, and my mother and father used to take us on family cruises, and I remember my father's face when I think I had about 30 quid for the family holiday when I was about 12 years old, and I gambled it on red or black, and it came up on the last doubling up on the ship's casino, and my father looked at the sky and said, "Oh, thank goodness he's done that." And I guess that was to me, I'm an addictive personality, so these addictions are within the blood. Dog track, in actual fact, became something that I became quickly obsessed with. So from the age of 17 through to the age of, I guess, 35, I had a massive gambling addiction, and it grew progressively. But my gambling addiction was not just about... it started off with using the dogs, and it became very destructive because I would have any money that I might have, and it would go very, very quickly. And then I would be ending up having to sort of ask my parents for more money and make up excuses as to what I wanted the money for. The actual gambling, sort of 17, 18, was destructive not only because of the money I was losing, but because in actual fact it took me away from interaction and peer group. So instead of being out with my friends, I was actually more preoccupied with looking at the racing or going to the next dog meeting. And I ended up, when I was 22, with a friend who was much older than me, and he said, "Would you like to have a share in a greyhound?" So I then bought a greyhound, and then I started racing the greyhounds around tracks like the White City and Wimbledon and Wembley. And so again, if you think that my own peer group was not really interested in that, they were doing sort of party things, and I was in actual fact attracted to being out of the way and confined into the gambling. So the gambling took away a social life. The gambling actually cost a lot of money, and it was in actual fact diverting me with things within my own life. So my own agendas of problems around relationships and meeting people, and actually it became a diversion. So the gambling sort of progressed, and as I got a little older, the dogs, the horses were always there. But then things like casinos came in as well. Now, when I'm 56 now, when I was sort of 22, 23, the betting shops, as they do today, didn't have the fixed odd machines. So where people can go in and just play on the fixed odds machines. This was more like going into casinos. So what I found was, I didn't know it at the time, but later on I started to see that the more time I spent in casinos, dog tracks, horse racing, it was the more I was beginning to get a social life within those environments. And the social life was completely alien to the one that I should have been getting. So rather than interacting with friends, for there was a reason why I wasn't interacting with friends or uncomfortable within that environment, whether it would be that I'd missed out when I was 16, 17, whether I was in actual fact interested in other things is another situation. But I had in actual fact started substituting the act of being in a casino, the act of being at a dog track, the act of being at a horse racing, whatever it was. Actually, it was preventing me doing something at a more natural level. So after that, I then progressed on, and I found a game called Backgammon, which is a board game, and I also started playing poker, and I used to play with a set of friends, always 10 or 15 years older than me, these so-called friends. And what I sort of began to realize is that, well, I realize now that it was difficult to spot at the time, that it didn't really matter to me whether I was winning or losing. And that was the extraordinary thing about my gambling. What mattered to me, that I was with a set of people that supposedly enjoyed my company. So in actual fact, that when I went into a casino and the maitre d' would say, "Oh, come and Mr. So-and-so, come and sit down at your normal place. We've been looking forward to seeing you, and have a meal and have some drinks," and then they usher you downstairs. So if you're losing money in a casino, they look after you. So I then worked out later on in my own recovery from gambling addiction that what I was in actual fact then doing was seeking through the act of gambling actually intimacy. So I was confusing the intensity of the gambling for the intimacy that I really wanted. So there was something missing in my life. Whereas I wanted relationships, where I wanted company, the actual gambling itself was in actual fact substituting this. So not only did I have an addiction where it kept me away from my peer group, it cost me a lot of money, and it in actual fact isolated me, but it also was substituting something else which was far more cunning. In terms of finances and costing, I remember when I was at public school in Eastbourne, my father came down and paid off a debt in the Coral bookmaking shop at the age of 16 and a half, because I had sort of blagged credit into the betting shop there. And he had to come down and on several occasions pay off £150, £200 worth of debt, which was a lot of money in those days. I remember being in the company, we had a family business, and I used to go in and write up chits for petty cash, which was supposedly for something else, but they was to facilitate gambling. I remember getting presents and selling the presents and selling those off so that I could in actual fact enable the gambling. Cocaine, actually, I only really discovered cocaine at the age of 36. And for the first couple of years, I was sort of buying a very small quantity, bringing it back to the flat, cutting it up, hiding it, making sure the cleaner couldn't find it, and a small amount of cocaine would last me a month. If you roll the clock forward 2 years, I was buying large industrial quantities of the drug, having it in the flat, and not only that, not hiding it very well, and it was all over the place, so anyone could really to see it. And like all addictions, and it's what started off with having the odd line once a week ended up in actually having to use cocaine at 8 o'clock to get up in the shower, 9 o'clock to get going in the morning, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock before going to the pub, then actually facilitating the alcohol, and then going on through the night and staying up until about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning yet another night had gone away. So the cocaine became obsessive, into the fact that just before rehab I was using an ounce, that's 28 grams every 10 days. So it's about 3,000 a month on cocaine abuse for the last 2 years of active using. A typical week at this stage was going up to London, hiring a room in a hotel, going to nightclubs, drinking a lot of alcohol, obtaining a lot of cocaine, and ending up in the casinos. And if you have that kind of disposable cash, which is cash, and if you in actual fact are in such a place where you're so upset and so helpless around what's going on, spending, and my spending was at the rate of probably £5,000 to £6,000 a week, and that can soon wipe things out. Going back sort of 15 years ago, I would have thought that my gambling, my cocaine addiction, and my alcoholism would cost me the best part of £1 million. It's easy to do. The perception is that if you happen to be supposedly a wealthy person and you get into an addictive cycle which is very isolated, who do you ask for help? Pride comes into it, self-esteem comes into it, denial comes into it. And if you're, for instance, worth £1 million, supposedly worth £1 million, and it sounds arrogant to say this, it's not meant to be, and you've only got $500,000 in the bank, to you, that's such a loss that you can't tell the outside world. I started selling my personalised number plate off my car. I sold my endowment policies. I sold my insurance policies. I sold the watercolours off my wall. Fortunately, I did have some assets left, and I thought I need to stop here. And I actually broke down and asked the family, and the family then helped me. And from that moment onwards, I went into rehab, and the mere fact that I'd been able to name the addictions meant that I could in actual fact do something to get into recovery.
So did your family and friends not know up until that point?
For me, no, because I led quite an isolated life. I lived by myself, so it had no effect on relationships as such. And I remember I used to have, I lived in Richmond and I moved down to Guildford in 1993. So within my using, I used to tell my Guildford friends I was with my Richmond friends. I used to tell my Richmond friends I was with my Guildford friends. And my family were there, but I never told them what was going on. And I was a good actor. I think to be an addict, you need to be a good actor.
Do you remember the moment that you decided that enough was enough?
That's when I ended up on the floor of a flat, and I was unable to function for about 2 or 3 days. And then my sister called and said I was all right, and then I broke down, and she came down, and a day later I was in rehab. Okay. I was in rehab for 28 days, so residentially for 28 days, and then I did 7 weeks of daycare, and I then did one-to-one therapy for about 6 months. And in recovery, there are 12-step fellowship meetings, such as Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. And we're shown these fellowships as a way of continuing ongoing recovery. And today, in my 12th year, I still attend Narcotics Anonymous meetings. It's not now that I want to drink, use drugs, or gamble. It's the fact that I don't want to. So I have to associate myself. I choose to associate myself in a fellowship where other people are coming in off the street. They're 1 day clean, they're 20 years clean. There's a whole different variety of experiences, and it's by reminding yourself of what was going on for you that you choose not to do it.